Another setting that you may want to stage is the IP information that the switch will use for communicating with the dashboard. In dashboard, this setting is under LAN IP. This LAN IP is not a VLAN interface. This is the interface that the switch will use only to send and receive management traffic to and from the dashboard. By default, Meraki switches will try to attain connectivity via DHCP. So this means that out of the box, as long as the network you're plugging the switch into has a DHCP server running, it will obtain an address on its own for management. Because Meraki devices connect to the cloud automatically, you may not find a good reason to change this. It's not like you're going to use this address to remotely access the switch with SSH or anything. However, there are a couple of situations where you might want to change the IP information. The first one is if you want the switch to use DHCP on a specific VLAN. If your switch's uplink is a trunk with multiple VLANs allowed, you may have a preference for which VLAN you want your device's management interface to be on. We can click the edit icon here and then enter the VLAN ID that we want the switch to use for management. In my situation, we know that once we have this switch plugged in, its uplink is going to be a trunk port where there are 3 different VLANs, all with active DHCP servers. VLAN 10 is our management VLAN, so we'll put in 10 for the VLAN ID. When this switch downloads its configuration, it will start sending DHCP discovers on VLAN 10. If it receives an offer, once it completes that process, it will use an IP address on VLAN 10 for its management communication with the dashboard. The other reason you might want to change this is if you want the switch to use a specific IP address on a specific VLAN. So we can click the edit icon again, and we can choose static IP and set all of this information manually. Let's say that we need our switch to have an IP address of 172.16.1.2. We would put that in along with all the rest of the information that it asks for, and then the switch will use a static IP for management communication with the dashboard. When this switch downloads its configuration, it will know we want it to use the static address, but it will need to first validate that it can reach the internet with that address. So it will send an ARP request for the IP address of the default gateway. If it receives a response, the switch will proceed to use that static IP information for management. If that fails, it will just continue using DHCP. The alternative way that you could force an MS switch to use a particular IP address is to configure a fixed IP assignment on your DHCP server. This way, when the switch sends a DHCP discover, your DHCP server will offer it the reserved address from the DHCP pool. To do that, you'll need to consult the documentation for your DHCP server. And that's really all there is to it. There is a lot of flexibility for how you configure the switch's management IP, but remember, if you don't change it, the switch will still default to DHCP, and as long as your network has a DHCP server and internet connectivity, the switch will reach out and connect to the Meraki cloud on its own.